Hello, this is the second episode in my 8-foot tall Thanos costume build. In this video I'll be making the biceps. In the first episode I made his forearms and I also resized and laid out the Pepicure file for printing. So if you haven't seen that, make sure you check that out first. Also be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel for notifications on when I release future episodes in this series as well as other cool projects. So let's get cracking! Here's all the pieces for the bicep printed out. I'm just going to lay these out to find out which pages join onto which other pages. Make sure when you set this to print in the Pepicure designer that you set it to print alignment marks on each of the pages. You can find out how to do this in episode 1 of this series. And then that prints out a little cross in the corner of each page. You just got to line those up and then stick the pieces together with tape. Just making a few adjustments on this piece here where I think you should cut instead of where you actually have to cut some of the parts. You don't need to cut the little darts into the pieces as it's foam, it will bend instead. That way you have less seams. Just going to cut these parts out now with some scissors, and some of the more fiddly bits I'll use a craft knife. Lay them out on the table here just to get an idea of what attaches to what. This piece here, I've just cut it on two sides and made it so you can fold it in on itself. That way you can draw around it, fold that bit in and then draw the bit that would normally need to be cut out. These little pieces, instead of doing them individually, I've made that into one big template by just joining them all together and drawing around it. But I'm going to keep those, I need to cut those out into detail pieces later. These two pieces I'm going to join together into one big piece, and this piece here I'm going to cut off the bottom bit because that bit's meant to be folded under anyway, so you don't need that. Same deal with this, that edge along the bottom there is supposed to be folded in on itself, so I'm just going to trim that away. Now we're going to stick some of these pieces together that could do with being one big piece rather than lots of little pieces. That'll give it less seams, that'll make it look nicer, and it'll also be less points of potential failure. So this is one piece, very unlikely that bit's going to break off, whereas if it was glued it might well come unglued and fall apart. So joining these two pieces up now, but I'm not going to stick them all the way along the edge because I'm going to want to take that piece off again so I can then draw around the piece on its own for a detail line. You'll see me do that later on in the video. Joining up some more pieces that could do with being one big piece rather than lots of little ones. So the whole thing only makes up half of the arm. So we're going to have to flip these over to make the other side. Now some of these I've
printed out twice, flipped them over and stuck them together to make them the left and the right as one big piece rather than having a seam run down the centre. Drawing around these with the back of a knife. If you use a Sharpie, it will bleed through your paint later on. Now using a very sharp knife to cut these out. You don't want a dull knife as it will just drag through the foam and tear it, and you'll be left with an uneven edge. It'll be hard to glue together. So once all the pieces are cut out, just lay them out so you can get a rough idea of how they fit together and whether or not you need to make any adjustments. And then it needs to be curved. Just heat the back with a heat gun. Don't heat the front, otherwise you'll risk burning the foam. Just gradually bending this as I heat it, and then hold it into shape until it cools. I find it's better to bend it further than you need it to bend, and then you find it will relax slightly and it'll be closer to the shape you want it. This piece here, a dart up the middle that I've cut out. I'm going to bend that into shape, and then that dart will be closed with hot glue and taped into place. The tape is going to be on there just to hold that together while the glue sets, otherwise I've got to sit there holding it for ages. So this is the part from that template where I folded back those pieces. So those bits that I folded back, I've drawn those on, I've cut those out, and I'm going to glue those ever so slightly down. So about a third of the way down, just to give an extra layer of detail there. These bits need to go on at a slight angle to the edge of that part with the dart in it, so I'm going to cut an edge, a beveled edge, to the side that joins on. I'm holding this on the edge of my table to keep the piece flat, and I'm just using my knife to cut an angle into the edge of it. Lots of hot glue and tape to hold it in place while the glue sets. Heat forming some more pieces. This piece is being glued set slightly back as well, so you apply glue only to the top edge of the part that's on the bottom. Now to make sure this lines up before I go ahead and glue it, I'm going to pin it into place using straight upholstery pins. And then I'm going to glue this from the back side. I'm just gluing more pieces on to finish off bulking out the arm and shoulder area. While I'm doing this, I've always got the laptop next to me with the Biceps file open in Pepicure Designer, so I can always have a quick look at that to make sure I'm sticking all the pieces on the right way. Some parts that don't join up, best not to try and squish them together and hope the glue will hold. Most likely it won't, so it's better to then heat those from the back and manipulate them a little bit, squash them down, stretch them a bit, and then once you're sure that they're pretty much touching, then apply the glue. Don't worry about sticking tons of pins into your foam. The pinholes are so small you never know they were there. Just got to be careful when using your heat gun that you don't open up the glue seams that you've already done. So again, I've heated this and I'm now pushing the middle piece in slightly so it joins up with the piece on the top. This top piece here being pinned into place, and then more hot glue, lots of hot glue. If you think you've used enough hot glue, you probably haven't. Use some more. And that's the basic shape all done. Obviously you've got to do this twice, you've got one for each arm. Remember to flip the pieces so that you've got a left one and a right one, although in this case they are symmetrical down the middle, so they're identical on both sides, so you don't really need to do that. This part I stuck together earlier, I'm going to separate that so we're left with just the one piece, and then I'm going to draw around the edge. But first I'm going to pin that into place so it doesn't move when I'm drawing around it, because if you're doing the drawing with the back of a knife you only get one chance at doing it, and if you mess it up you can't really rub it out or anything. So now I'm putting pins where the little detail lines need to be. There's lots of tiny little strips of foam that are raised from the surface. I'm putting pins to mark where they're supposed to go. Before I apply those though, that detail line I put in, I'm going to score that into the foam using my knife, a very sharp knife, to cut about a third of the way into the foam, and then use a heat gun over that, and then that will open up that cut. So I've got a piece of foam here that is too thick, so I'm cutting that down the middle to make it about half as thick. Of course you could use foam that is already the right thickness and you wouldn't have to bother doing this, but I don't have any. I'm now cutting this the correct length of those detail lines, and I'm cutting each one to the correct width. And then using those pins as a marker, I'm going to hot glue those all into place. And there they are all on. Just got to do that to the other side, and then both sides on the other arm. Now that piece where we stuck all those tiny little triangle pieces together, we now need to go back to those and use those individually and cut those out of some thin foam as well. Now not all of them are raised, only a few of them are raised, so make sure you check with the model which ones are raised and which ones are not, because you're going to need half of them. So you cut those out using the ones that you haven't cut out, using those templates to mark the spacing correctly for the ones that are raised. So those raised details make it look a lot better. So now another piece, well, I stuck two parts together, separated them again, and just as before I'm going to pin that into place so the template doesn't move while I'm marking out my line. And then again using the back of a knife to score in where I'm going to cut. Just do not use a Sharpie to do this because it will bleed through your paint. Cutting a third of the way in, open that up with a heat gun as before. And now using a very, very sharp knife, we're going to carve in a crisscross detail, just as I did with the forearms. Each of these lines is about 3 mm apart. And this next bit is going to be done running perpendicular with the horizontal lines on the armour. And once you've cut all of these in, using the heat gun to open them up, and then you've got a really cool looking texture.
And here they are all finished, and they turned out rather well. Those raised areas and that texture in there really adds a good bit of detail to them that I think will look really cool when it's all painted up. I think I see a future problem maybe in that they're not fully enclosed there. It's not going to have an inside to the bicep, which may be a problem, but we're not wearing it here. It's going to be worn up here somewhere, so maybe it needs to have a gap there when you wear it. I don't know, we're going to have to cross that bridge when we come to it. But before we do, we've got a lot more building to do. The next video, I'm going to be making the shoulders and the helmets, so make sure you subscribe to this channel for updates on that. And be sure to check out the social media links in the description of this video. And remember, you don't have to be great at making to make something great. Thanks for watching, goodbye!